Okay, this video on atmosphere in paintings, being the Big Apple really. I mean, there's attributes of paintings that are terrific, and there's some that are really good, and there's some that are very nice, but to really put them all together, a person needs all the skills and have it come together with the sense that there's actually atmosphere in the painting, as well as good texture, volume, mass, shadows, cast shadows, reflected light. When you get them all together and you create the sense of atmosphere, then you've got it all together, basically. So I'm going to show you some things and talk you through them. This is a painting that I did while I was in graduate school at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art in Philadelphia. When I was sitting on the floor, this painting was also on the floor leaning against the wall. I had a critic behind me, one of the graduate critics, suggesting that the principal characters in the painting and the background didn't seem to be sharing the same atmosphere. Now I was brand new at painting, really. I had just had enough experience that I was so fortunate to get into this school. So it just left me stunned. I thought, how do you create atmosphere? And they looked at each other, the critics, and made it sound like they looked at each other like, that's not an easy question to answer. So I spent Christmas break painting pictures of onions, trying to get this atmosphere into my paintings, this elusive atmosphere. And onions help me a lot. If they ever talk about my artwork in any art history settings, they're gonna have to talk about these onion paintings because they had a pivotal influence in my being able to do any of the other paintings I've done since. So we're going to talk about some of those attributes. Now, if you look here, let's see, I'll point at it with this brush. If you look here, we've got this edge of this onion comes against this fabric that's behind it. Now, they're about the same value, the cloth and the onion, and yet there's a slight change of color, but the value is close. So in effect, we're dealing with edges here. What we're talking about is edges. And this edge has what we would call passage. Visual passage. You can easily move from this fabric through this edge and onto the onion and travel right through it. Now, this other edge over here, that's got a little bit more contrast against the background. So we would call that more of an accent. Bruce Samuelson, one of the teachers at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, would call that accent, and he would refer to it as, say a Russian just got off the ship and he's come up to you and he's wanting some guidance. He'll say, "Comrade, can you help me find it?" You know, I'm doing a terrible accent, but anyway, it's just harder to visually move across there. But if you look close, even that edge is a little bit fuzzy there. It's a little bit fuzzy, which helps. But we need enough accent, enough contrast edges that we're able to continue to hold the form of the object and know what it is. So we have some form here and here and here and here. And along here, it's very faint with a lot of easy visual passage along here. But that's some of the aspects of visual passage versus visual accent. Now, if this onion were painted much more white, the edges weren't so softened in their deepening value there, which creates the illusion of this being an object that's got volume and mass, and you could actually hold on to it and pick it up. But if it were painted on another location, then cut out, and then stuck on here, glued on here, taped on here, whatever, then we would have what would look like something cut out. And that's totally not going to give you the illusion of atmosphere. So we get to where we have lost edges. I mean, the value between that gray in the cloth and that warmer brownish tones in the onion still are so close in value that we can shift through there really easily. Can almost lose the edges in there. Now, another aspect beyond the edges themselves is reflected light. Now, if you pay attention to this surface right here underneath the onion, some of this tone, the onion tone, is painted into that surface. It creates the idea that these two are affecting each other. They are relating to each other and having effect on each other. And this color of the onion is also being reflected onto this shadowy side of this little onion. So they're sharing atmosphere, as it were. Now see, this nice onion color here is starting to show up over here in this fold. It's darker. It's not light like what's down here. It's darker because it's in a shadow, a darker area. But the reflection of that color up in there helps us establish the idea that these various aspects of the painting, these elements, are having an effect on one another. And it helps us to establish the illusion of atmosphere. Now, as we get our volume and mass right, and our shadowing and our lighting, so that we can believe that that's an actual onion that you could hold on to, then we start being able to believe that there's air behind that onion, that we could put our hand back there. All of these things help us establish the sense of value, or I don't mean value, I mean atmosphere. So now if we go into this onion painting, we see that now we have pretty strong accent here between this dark red and the white onion skin. So, and look, this red is reflecting up onto the onion here, and again up under here. And then this one is reflecting onto this side of the onion. So even though we have lost edges, we can really move around in here easily. And even over here on this shadow up onto the onion, and up in here, look at that. We can just move right into this onion visually. Even in here onto this white onion. And these darker tones in this piece of the onion skin are deep enough that we can move around in there pretty easily. So you get different degrees of visual passage. Like this one, you can move in a little easier than maybe this one, because of the purple. It's a little bit darker value, so it's going to let you move a little easier. And look at that right along there. See that color on the onion skin versus that color of the cloth. Now, if this cloth was satin or silk, then we're going to get a lot more reflection of these things down in here. But because that's not happening, then our mind believes, based on the experience that we've had in life, that this fabric is more of a fuzzy, softer cloth, and it's not going to give us that shimmery reflection. And the same with this over here. So now I'm going to show you a few other examples of this working in paintings. We go over past this part of my windows and up here. I've got this lovely painting of my daughter with her Dalmatian dog. And we're going to come in and look at this paw. You see how there's this really nice dark shadow underneath the paw. I mean, it's really dark onto the surface of this concrete, this driveway. That holds the painting, or the paw, down. It plants it onto the ground. Now, if we go across over here and see the arch of this leg letting light through because it's not right against the concrete, then just as in situations of real life, there is a softening of the shadows because light's bouncing around in there. It's not hitting it directly, but it's bouncing off this ear over here or off this ground over here, and light's coming through here and softening, blurring the edges of this shadow. But look here, further beyond this shadow, we're seeing a light space underneath what we can see. It's like we're seeing under and beyond this dog's leg onto the concrete back here. As though between this dog's neck and this dog's leg, there is light getting down through there, and we could reach in there, grab the leg if we wanted, or push against the neck, or touch the cement back down under here. So these things are helping us establish the sense of atmosphere, or the sharing of space between the dog and the cement. Look at that, same sort of things happening here. But now there's some other aspects that are happening. So look along the top ridge of this dog's leg. See how the value is quite light? Well, that's in contrast to the darker value on the neck and the ear of the dog. So that light being on that leg like that, where that part of the leg is facing up to the sky, pressed against the darkening values of the neck and ear because they are more vertical. See, we're getting light up here like we're doing on the top of the leg. The same thing's happening up here. But down the side of the neck and the leg of the ear, it's darker because the light's hitting it less directly, which lets us to believe that this leg with its ridge of light is closer to us than the ear and the neck. Now that's a pretty short field of distance between that leg and that neck. But handled correctly with the right lighting and shadows, we're going to get this illusion that there's space in there. So we're having atmosphere, air inside that space. And then things get softened down here and the dog's body seems to be going further away from us. So that's another example of something you can put into place to create the sense of togetherness and atmosphere. Isn't that lovely? Look at that softening shadow as it comes out here. Okay, let's find another example. So over here with these yo-yos, you can see that I didn't put the background scene in at all. There are no trees back there, no grass, no automobiles, no houses, nothing back there. But I did put a representation of the cement that these yo-yos are sitting on. So if we look over here, let's zoom in on this spot right here. If you pay attention to this bit of this yo-yo, all right, we're going to have some pretty strong accent here in contrast with this light area that's, we're believing, is beyond the yo-yos. It's going back into the distance. It's got some illusion or some indication of this same sort of texture here, but it's less defined. So that helps us to believe that this yo-yo with its crisp edge is closer to us than this yo-yo that's not got this light and crispness. This has light, it's warm. This is darker, less warm, less distinct back in there. Even though when we get closer, we can see that this edge actually is a bit fuzzy, which visually helps us to accept it as part of this whole scene, that these are playing on each other. You can see that the shadow in here gets lighter toward the back, and it even has some little fuzzy bits on its edges. Those soften it visually for us, so it makes it more acceptable that they are there together as independent, full-bodied objects. Look at this nice contrast between this edge of this yo-yo and this darker yo-yo that's further back. And then look here. Now we're back in this area. We have none of this definition that we had down here. Nothing indicated as substance, but we still have this nice, slightly fuzzy edge that's got different tones of value playing on it so that we can feel comfortable with it softening as it connects with that deeper space. Now if we get up here on this yellow, top half of this yo-yo, it's yellow. This blue yellow is going to bounce light onto this yellow yo-yo, this blue yo-yo, yellow yo-yo. And so it's going to start playing with the color, and we're going to get a bit of a green tone along here as they affect each other. See this stuff happening? And this red one here is bouncing off onto this one right here. These things are causing us to experience what happens in real life, and we believe them. Even though this is a very flat, two-dimensional surface. Look at this, these nice dirty oil stains that have given patina to this yo-yo. This kid probably wasn't too careful about the peanut butter on his hands from his lunch, getting all over his toy. So these are some of the same principles happening in an entirely different subject matter as we view this painting. Look at that chipped up paint back there. We believe it. Nice little brush strokes, creating this sense of texture on this surface, catching light on that back yo-yo. And this one here is reflecting onto this one here, bouncing light from there to there. All right, so now we're gonna look at one more above this one. Now here's another example, but this time the background is not a nice, well-defined hedge like what was behind my daughter and her dog Lady laying on the driveway. But we're still getting some of this atmospheric effect. Not only do the upside down view of the trees in the background come into more sharper focus and let us know of something that our brain will believe is further into the distance, but they make it interesting. And then we can have these things that are just sort of blurred or just like almost water, the way light works in glass. And then the edges get dark, so we're getting the same volume and mass to the object. Light up here, the green's kind of playing into the light on the top there. The blue sky is more playing on it here. And then we get into the deeper colors of the marble. And then this marble blocking out the light from that marble and vice versa. So we end up with some darker tones. Look how deep the blue gets in here and how dark the reds get over here. Look at this edge. There's a little bit of light playing on there. It's going to help us to believe that it's round and it's going back and curving away from us or curving towards us. Okay. So now I'm going to take you out of my studio space into this hallway where we have a few other pieces hanging here. But this is a painting I did of my daughter sitting in a tree. And there she is, just like that. And you get some nice things you can play with realism. Look at those nice mosquito bites left over from when she's been out at night. Look at her keen shoes. Look at the light catching on that knee right there. And then that shadow coming in and playing into the side of that rise, which is her knee cap. Now, on this arm, we could, this painting has the light coming this way. And we could have had this edge of her arm be light because the light's coming from over there. But to help create that illusion of her arm rounding over and having volume to it that you could grab a hold of, or you could push on the tissue, the fleshy tissue of her arm there, I added a little darker value along that side of her arm there, and then brought the lighter portion of the light coming onto that arm a little further in onto her arm. And then we have this nice contour shadow between the light and the reflected light, the lighter part of the shadow, that darker part that comes along here. And we get the shirt bouncing back onto here. But this shadow here, this darker value, combined with these other elements, allows us to believe that that arm rounds and has volume and mass. Now the same thing's happening with each finger. Look how they, believably, there's a real hand there. There's flesh to it. There's mass to it. It's got a front and a back, and there's air inside underneath there. And we're having the same sort of things happening over here. Got that darker value here, and it comes in and the light comes across her arm. The shadows are playing around down in here. And then on this upper arm, we have the light closer to that front edge, and this little bit of darkening values right along there that are influenced by the color of this shirt help us get that rounding, that believable rounding. And then here on the back side of our arm, we've got reflected light. Now, if we had played with this reflected light as though it were like bright green, like one of these crazy bands that were popular when she was young, then it would be overstated. The same sort of thing would be happening on the cheek of her jawline there, or on her neck. They could be overstated. Now in art, you can do just about anything you want nowadays. And this painting could have been done with some really intense colors in places that would not be trying to create the illusion of what happens in life, which makes this reality. This is realism. But if we were wanting to make it more extreme, just like some people do with their photographs, they enhance the colors. Nothing wrong with that. It's just a different approach to creating art. So with me trying to create the illusion of realism, I tone down this so that it's reflecting light from over here somewhere off this tree trunk, but still making it possible for us to believe that this is a scene of a real girl having a real experience sitting in this tree. Now, I don't know that I can get back far enough to let you know, but this tree is all one when it comes out of the ground, but then it has all these variety of trunks that come right off just after it's come out of the ground. And I've painted this one with much more gray tones, kind of got the bluish gray, where I've got brown tones back in there, and brown again back up here, maybe some green tones in it. And then over here, this has got the gray again, and then over here it warms up with a sense of kind of a greenish brown, and then the brown on this one again. So even though it's all one tree coming out of the ground, it has some variation, which keeps the painting interesting. So put all together these principles of volume and mass, getting your light and shadow done properly, your reflected light, your edges. See, even those edges, look along that forehead. It darkens up just a little bit. And then along the ridge of her bridge of her nose and the cheek down here. These things help us to create the illusion of that rounding. And then this color of reflected light is influenced by the surrounding tree. So we'll shift back into my studio area. These principles are more complex, I suppose, when it comes to something like this, where we're dealing with translucency. But you can see that, again, if you look at that edge, the darker values there help us to hold the edge of the fact that there's a bottle that has a rigid surface. It's made out of something brittle and it's solid and you can hold it, and it's not that barn wall that's behind it there. So that lets us separate those. So we want some of that accent. And over here, it's less strong of an accent. And here it's kind of busted up with lines, but we still have a majority of light here and dark there, where over here it's the opposite, dark on the bottle and light in the background. So we're getting the same principles, but now we're painting what we see through the bottle, like this distorted, this handle, how it's distorted in here. It's, we're seeing it through the bottle. It's on the other side of the bottle, but still we're painting it here because we see it through the bottle. So a lovely subject matter, and when you get close, you can see we're just playing with a lot of little nuances of what happens with glass as we see through it. But we're still getting some variations with what's happening along the edges. The tones of gray here versus the gray here help us to have separation, even though they're not that different from each other. But here, this is pretty strong, and yet we still have some lighter tone right on the edge of that bottle that helps us softening to our mental ability to accept it as being in front of, with space between it and that barn wall behind it. Isn't that lovely? That middle, that glass with its fractures. I don't ever pick up this bottle by its handle anymore because I don't want that plastic loop that holds that metal on to bust loose. It's just so avoidable. So here we go. Here's another example. This is a recent painting I've just completed. It's called Coming Soon. Christ in his red robes with his white horse that he'll be coming with. And here we have some interesting things happening with this one, because this cloud, we want to be in the distance. We want them to be in the same atmosphere, but we want them to be separated. So we're definitely having some strong edge changes between this horse and the distant clouds. This is definitely lighter. We definitely can follow that shape of that horse's belly or its legs. See, now down here, when we're coming against something lighter, we start losing an edge again. And some of that here, but just a hint of line there. So even in this shadow, look how I soften the edges. It's a bit blurry. So anyway, just to let you know that to create the sense of atmosphere in a painting is basically using all your skills as a painter. You know how to deal with your edges, with creating the illusion of different textures, whether they're shiny, like with some of those onions. If we had had a mirror there, they would have been completely reflected, and we would have been painting them upside down to get the same, to get the sense of what the materials that were involved really were. So if you have any questions, you can put them in your comments, but it's a terrific thing to be able to create the sense of atmosphere in a painting, which when I first heard about it was totally new to me. I hadn't even considered the idea of atmosphere in a painting, but it's possible to do if you use your edges, your accents, your passage, your reflected light, the sense of texture and what the different textures are, and you put them all together, and you can create a really nice painting with a sense of real atmosphere in there, depth of field, and all the things you might want to have in a realistic painting. So that's it for today. Please ring the bell. I'm going to call that, instead of a notification bell, but I'm going to call it the Liberty Bell,
because I went to school in Philadelphia, and you will be at liberty to get really great content without having to go hunting it down. So that'd be a good thing to do. And if you'd make comments and share and subscribe, you're going to get more good content. And I appreciate your tuning in today. All right. Have a good day. Take care. Bye.